So let's begin our final session for today, session 11. Yes, so let's ask the first group or the first presenter.
Dear colleagues, allow me to welcome you at this conference on behalf of the speakers. That means on behalf of myself, Anna Savinskaya and Roman Bulando. I would also like to thank the hosts for holding this conference and the opportunity to make a presentation at it. So the topic of our presentation is use of digital resources by Japanese language learners. Nowadays, it's quite impossible to imagine the process of education at universities without use of digital resources and various technical aids. We believe, dear colleagues, that you are all familiar with the situation when the students keep using their smartphone all the time. However, at the same time, the students have different abilities and skills of online search on web and use of information found therein. I think that you all noticed that despite the students of today were born with Google in their hands, they quite often can't make a search query well. They don't look the search results after the first or the second one. They really search in any language except their native, in our case Russian, although they can use English or Japanese. And students don't even look at the references at the footnote of even Wikipedia article. There are certainly students who are quite perfect in using the web opportunities. However, our teaching experience shows that there are very few such students. A part of them doesn't master skills of working with online digital resources related to their specialty. That means, in our case, Japanese language and Japanese studies. The students are not aware of such resources and don't try to find them. And the authors of this study decided to support the empirical observations with the statistical research. In this context, the purpose of our study is to analyze how students use open digital resources related to Japanese studies. And we understand the term online digital resources in the broadest sense. This means any learning materials presented in a digital format and available on web. So when speaking about the online digital resources in this presentation, we understand them as software, information, full text electronic publications, databases, including audio and video records, illustrations, and catalogs of electronic libraries recorded on the electronic storage media and or posted on internet website, which are used for learning and research. No teaching method materials are included. And let me focus on description of experimental part of our study. Information about use of the online digital resources while learning Japanese language and related issues was collected by questionnaire survey method. 82 full-time students, mostly studying in the Japanese language department of our university, Moscow City University, were interviewed. Students' distribution by universities is as follows at this slide. And the breakdown of the students by year of study is as follows at this slide. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to attract a sufficient number of students from different universities of Russia and other countries to our survey. We will continue our study and correct this shortfall. As the questions of our survey were answered mostly by students of our university, let me state their major. We have the following majors at our department: bachelor's program, 2 of them, Japanese language and Japanese literature, and the second one, translation and translation studies, Japanese language. And we have 1 master's program, Japanese language teaching. The questionnaire was composed of questions that you may see on this slide. Mainly 2 topics were interested for us, using digital resources for learning Japanese and for research activities, and how many sources used by students. Next step, survey results. Here you can see number of resources used by the students. Analysis of the survey results shows that the following number of students use a certain number of digital resources while learning Japanese. You can see that half of respondents use from 2 to 5 items while learning Japanese language, and 5% of students do not use any digital resources at all. Sorry. And here you can see how digital resources used by students for their research activity. Almost half of students, namely 48%, use from 2 to 5 items, and we have about 18% of students that do not use resources at all when they do some research. I don't know how they do, they conduct it, but still it is like it is. Review of the survey results also enabled a compilation of the list of the digital resources used by our students. It is 85 in total, and you can see them in the file uploaded to the chat. Not all of the students of our department answered the questions of the survey, so we hope that the actual situation is better. The speaker recommended to the students to use databases that are not included in this list, and we know that some students definitely use databases of Nichi Bunken or corpuses from Chunagon, but they are not included in list. This slide shows types of digital resources used by students, and 53% is website. And we systematized the digital resources by various fields of the Japanese studies, and you may see the results on this slide. We pointed out next fields: language, literature, history, arts, politics, economics, religion, and students were also able to add their own fields, which was not proposed by us. And this slide tells us what resources are being lacking by students. A lot of respondents indicated the digital resources in specific field of the Japanese studies and resources used by them, and then wrote that they were lacking these type of resources in the same field. These points need an additional study which has been not conducted yet. The students may be quite unaware about availability of resources in some fields. Students answered the question, how do they hear about the digital resources used by them? We are happy to emphasize that this 45% actively search for the resources they need. However, insufficient interest of lecturers in distributing information about digital resources should be noted as well. Only 37% of students pointed out that they were told by their lecturers about some resources, digital resources. Perhaps a special lecture or even a special small academic discipline should be developed for the students to become aware of existed digital resources or to demonstrate how students can use digital resources. And the findings of the research allow drawing conclusions as follows. The students use some digital resources during learning, and for their research, though the list of them is list of resources is rather limited. The list of digital resources on Japanese language and various fields of the Japanese studies are not sufficiently complete. Lack of interest in dissemination of information on digital resources is traced among the lecturers and teachers. And students need more information on the digital resources related to Japanese language and various fields of the Japanese studies. That is all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Any questions here or online, please? Yes, please.
Thank you for your interesting presentation. I just wanted to ask you, if possible, to show us or send us the list of resources.
Yes,
that's it. That's it.
Now it is on the chat. Am I right, Vasily? It is uploaded, the file is, but I can send you personally.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any other questions from our online participants, maybe?
Yes, there is a question from online participants from Christine Holly Williams. Was there a role for librarians?
Pardon?
Was there a role for librarians?
What for?
Role, yeah.
No, unfortunately, we didn't know any libraries of that list, if I understand correctly, yes?
Well, usually librarians compile lists of digital resources and post them online or just give like handouts, paper handouts.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, at your university, do university librarians make lists of digital resources for students? I guess.
We do, not librarians, but we do this list, but it's not quite enough to show once for students and say, this and this and these things are you can use them. It's not enough. You should explain, not once maybe for some genius, but many times in a year, and to demonstrate how to use them. Just distribute the list, it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's not enough. And as I noticed, well, students don't usually attend such conferences where digital resources are advertised and shown and explained.
Should be more, maybe some seminars of specialists on digital resources only for students, and not for all students of all universities, but for some special university considering their major and so on. And only after many repeating, they maybe start to use some of them.
And can you just briefly mention, well, just give several examples of digital resources that, were mentioned or are used?
A lot of dictionaries, of course, Shonagon, now it moved on Chunagon. They don't use Chunagon, I don't know why, but they use Shonagon. Also, Chunagon was advised. They used full text databases. Maybe I'm not correct in pronunciation, Saini. Saini, they use it. There is kind of Saini in Russian, a library, they use of it. They use it, of course. Another example, it's okay.
Okay, thank you. Oh, yes, another question, please.
Thank you for your presentation. And as a person who has recently not a student, so just half a year, I want to ask, as a previous student, what your students prefer to use, digital resources or, for example, paper resources, or maybe other alternative such as associations, maybe games, mind games, and so on?
They, of course, prefer use digital resources, websites, not paper resources. And one reason for that, it's more available. Maybe some paper resources more comfortable. They started to understand it, that it's not so complicated to use paper resources because it's not so bad for their eyes, for their health and so on. But digital resources are much more available maybe this one help you. They used mostly these kinds application are not so much, as you can see.
Okay, thank you. And I have one more question. Do your students make any proposals, give you any ideas to create some new resources in your university, or maybe to update some existing?
Yes, sometimes they ask us, but it is because they don't know that it is it's already done. If you start to search, it's already done a long time before. They just don't know about it.
Yes, it's a simple problem for students, I can say for sure. Thank you.
Okay, well, I guess we don't have much time for additional. Are there any online questions? No. Okay, let's wrap up this part and move on.